Everything you thought you knew about Zak Bagans just changed. At exactly 2:47 a.m. on December 18, 2025, a video file appeared on an encrypted server used by Ghost Adventures production staff. No upload logs, no sender information, just a single file labeled "The Truth About Vegas." What it contained sent shockwaves through everyone who saw it. Within hours, 3 crew members quit. The Travel Channel issued an emergency meeting, and Zak Bagans himself went completely silent, deleting his social media accounts and disappearing from public view. This story goes deeper than anyone imagined. Stay with us, because what you're about to discover will fundamentally change how you see the man who made millions hunting ghosts. Subscribe now. You'll want to remember where you heard this first. The file was 47 minutes long, grainy footage filmed inside the haunted museum after hours. But this wasn't a typical Ghost Adventures episode. There were no camera operators, no crew, no Aaron Goodwin nervously cracking jokes in the background. Just Zak, alone in the basement level that has never been shown to the public. He's sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by candles, speaking directly into a handheld camera. His voice is different, stripped of the theatrical bravado that made him famous. He sounds exhausted, almost defeated. The first words he speaks send chills through anyone watching. I need to tell you what really happened in 2019, the night we lost 3 days of footage, the night that changed everything. For years, fans had speculated about a mysterious incident during season 21. An entire investigation was filmed but never aired. Official statements blamed technical difficulties, equipment failure, but crew members who worked that night refused to discuss it, some signing NDAs, others simply going silent, until now. In the video, Zak reveals what actually happened. They had been investigating an abandoned psychiatric hospital in rural Montana, a place with documented deaths, alleged abuse, and decades of suffering soaked into the walls. During the lockdown, something unprecedented occurred. Every camera simultaneously recorded the same figure, a 7-foot shadow with elongated limbs standing at the end of a corridor. But here's what made everyone's blood run cold. The figure was facing away from the cameras, watching Zak. What followed was captured on audio, but the video mysteriously corrupted. Zak's voice, speaking in a language the crew didn't recognize. When they reviewed the audio later with a linguistics expert, the translation came back as medieval Latin, a dialect used by exorcists in the 14th century. Zak has no training in Latin. He couldn't explain how he knew the words. The network made a decision that night. The footage would be destroyed, backups erased, and everyone present would sign agreements never to speak about it. But Zak kept a copy. And now, 6 years later, he's releasing it. Before Ghost Adventures became a cultural phenomenon, Zak Bagans was a wedding videographer in Detroit. Few people know this. He spent his early 20s filming ceremonies, receptions, couples' first dances, ordinary life, safe work. But something happened in 2004 that set him on an entirely different path. During an overnight edit session at his apartment, Zak claims he saw something that shouldn't have existed. A full-bodied apparition of a woman in Victorian-era clothing standing in his hallway. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at him with hollow eyes before vanishing. That encounter obsessed him. He spent the next 2 years researching the paranormal, attending seances, visiting allegedly haunted locations. By 2006, he had pitched the concept for Ghost Adventures. The show launched in 2008 with a documentary-style pilot that won critical acclaim. Unlike other paranormal shows that relied on jump scares and manufactured drama, Ghost Adventures felt authentic, raw. The fear in Zak's voice when he called out to the darkness wasn't acting, it was genuine terror mixed with fascination. Viewers responded. Within 3 seasons, the show became one of the Travel Channel's highest-rated programs. But success came with consequences. As Ghost Adventures gained popularity, Zak's personal life began to crumble. His marriage ended in 2012, his wife later admitting in an interview that she couldn't compete with his obsession. Friends from his pre-fame life slowly drifted away, disturbed by his increasingly erratic behavior. He started collecting cursed objects, items that most paranormal investigators won't even touch. Dolls possessed by malevolent entities, mirrors that supposedly drove their previous owners to madness, objects tied to murders, suicides, ritualistic abuse. By 2017, when the Haunted Museum opened, Zak had amassed one of the largest collections of allegedly cursed artifacts in the world. Over 30 rooms filled with objects that paranormal experts warned him to destroy. He didn't listen. Instead, he built an empire around them, charging admission, filming specials, turning human suffering and supernatural horror into entertainment. People who worked closely with Zak during this period describe a man consumed by something he couldn't control. He would spend 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours alone in the museum, walking the halls, talking to objects as if they could respond. Security footage from 2019 shows him standing motionless in front of the Dybbuk box for over 2 hours, not blinking, barely breathing. When confronted about it, he claimed he was listening. Aaron Goodwin, Billy Tolley, and Jay Wasley weren't just Zak's co-hosts. They were his closest friends, men who had followed him into some of the darkest locations on Earth. Together, they had investigated over 200 allegedly haunted sites, confronted entities that terrified even seasoned paranormal researchers, and built a brotherhood forged in shared fear and adrenaline. But by 2023, cracks in that brotherhood had become impossible to ignore. Aaron stopped appearing in behind-the-scenes content. Billy's social media showed him distancing himself from the show's themes, posting instead about family and faith. Jay gave an interview where he cryptically stated, "There are some places you can't come back from, some things you shouldn't chase." Then came the incident that nobody was supposed to know about. During a museum lockdown in October 2024, cameras captured something that forced the network to intervene. Multiple sources, speaking anonymously, described footage of Zak becoming violent during a ritual. He allegedly attacked Aaron, claiming he saw something dark inside him. The crew had to physically restrain Zak until he collapsed, unconscious. When he woke up hours later, he had no memory of the incident. Medical tests revealed elevated cortisol levels, signs of extreme psychological stress, but nothing that explained the violent outburst. A neurologist who examined him off the record later told a friend, "I've seen trauma patients with more stability. Whatever is happening to him, it's not physical, it's something else." After that night, production was suspended indefinitely. The crew was told it was for creative restructuring, but insiders knew the truth. They were trying to figure out what to do about Zak. Aaron refused to film with him anymore unless a mental health professional was present. Billy demanded that certain artifacts be removed from the museum entirely. Jay simply said he was taking time to pray. The silence from the crew wasn't just professional courtesy, it was fear. They had seen something in Zak that night, something that convinced them he was no longer in control, and whatever had taken hold of him was getting stronger. When the Haunted Museum first opened its doors in October 2017, it was marketed as an educational experience, a place where visitors could learn about the history of the paranormal, view authenticated artifacts, and understand the cultural significance of supernatural beliefs across different eras and civilizations. The initial tours were relatively tame, informative. Even skeptics found the historical context fascinating, but something changed in early 2020. New acquisitions started arriving, objects Zak wouldn't discuss publicly. Entire rooms were closed off to tours, accessible only to Zak and a select few researchers. Staff members reported increasingly disturbing experiences. One tour guide claimed she saw shadows moving independently of any light source. Another quit after 3 visitors fainted during a single tour, all in the same room, all describing the same sensation of being choked. By 2022, the museum had developed a reputation that went beyond typical ghost story fare. Paranormal investigators from around the world began reporting that merely visiting the museum left them with lasting effects. Nightmares, sleep paralysis. Some claimed they saw figures in their homes that resembled objects from Zak's collection. A psychic medium who toured the basement level said she refused to ever return, describing an overwhelming presence of concentrated malevolence, unlike anything she had encountered in 30 years of professional work. Then there were the deaths. Between 2021 and 2024, 4 people who had worked at the museum died under circumstances that raised questions. A security guard suffered a sudden cardiac arrest at age 32 with no prior health issues. A maintenance worker drove his car off a bridge 3 weeks after cleaning a sealed storage room. A researcher committed suicide, leaving a note that simply read, "I can't make them stop talking." And a tour coordinator died in her sleep, her neighbor reporting that she had been screaming about the woman in white for hours before suddenly going silent. Zak never publicly connected these deaths to the museum, but privately, according to sources close to him, he became obsessed with finding a way to seal the energy inside the building. He consulted with priests, shamans, occultists, anyone who claimed to have knowledge of spiritual protection. None of their methods worked. If anything, the activity intensified. By late 2024, entire sections of the museum were off-limits even to staff. Zak installed industrial locks on certain doors, kept the keys on his person at all times, and allegedly slept inside the museum several nights a week, despite owning multiple properties in Las Vegas. Neighbors of the museum reported hearing sounds at night, screaming, banging, music playing at volumes that shook windows. When police were called, they found nothing, just Zak, alone, insisting he was conducting research. Every successful paranormal show has footage that never makes it to air. technical glitches, moments too boring for television, scenes that don't fit the narrative. But Ghost Adventures had something else. An archive of material so disturbing that network executives made the unprecedented decision to not just shelve it, but actively destroy it. A former editor who worked on seasons 18 through 22 broke their NDA in early 2025, speaking to a paranormal podcast under the condition of anonymity. They described footage that violated basic laws of physics, objects moving without explanation, voices responding to questions in real time with information no living person could know, and most disturbing, footage of Zak's face changing during investigations. His eyes rolling back, his voice dropping several octaves, his entire demeanor transforming into something unrecognizable. The editor claimed that during one investigation at a former sanatorium, cameras captured Zak speaking fluent Romanian despite having no knowledge of the language. He recited details about patients who had died in the building over a century ago, information that was later verified through historical records that weren't publicly available. When he came out of the trance-like state, he had no memory of what he had said, but the footage that ultimately led to the network's intervention came from a lockdown at an abandoned church in Louisiana. Multiple cameras simultaneously captured what appeared to be a full-body apparition materializing behind Zak. Not a shadow, not a trick of light. A solid, three-dimensional figure that moved with purpose and intelligence. It placed its hand on Zak's shoulder, and he smiled. The crew reviewing the footage reported immediate adverse effects. Headaches, nausea. One production assistant quit on the spot, claiming she felt something watching her through the screen. The decision was made within 24 hours. The footage would be destroyed. The investigation would never be mentioned, and everyone involved would sign ironclad NDAs. But Zak kept copies. According to the anonymous editor, he stored them in a personal archive, claiming they were proof of something he couldn't yet fully explain. Those copies, or at least portions of them, allegedly formed the basis of the encrypted file that surfaced in December 2025. In early 2025, Zak Bagans simply disappeared from public life. No announcements, no farewell posts. One day he was actively promoting upcoming museum events and new episodes, and the next, silence. His social media accounts went dark. The museum closed for what was labeled as extensive renovations. Ghost Adventures stopped production with no official explanation. For weeks, fans speculated. Some thought it was a publicity stunt. Others feared he had suffered a mental breakdown. A few claimed to have insider information suggesting health issues. But the truth, as it often is with Zak Bagans, was far stranger than anyone imagined. According to multiple sources who spoke to entertainment journalists on background, Zak had checked himself into a private facility in Northern California. Not a hospital, not a rehabilitation center, a specialized compound run by a group that described themselves as spiritual deprogrammers. People who work with individuals who have become, as they termed it, entangled with non-human intelligence. A former employee of this facility later confirmed that someone matching Zak's description had been a resident for approximately 6 weeks in early 2025. The treatment involved isolation, ritualistic cleansing, and extensive psychological evaluation. The goal was to separate the person from whatever entity or energy had attached itself to them during their paranormal work, but Zak left before completing the program. According to the source, he became agitated during a session, claiming that separating from the entity would mean losing everything I've built. He checked himself out against medical advice and returned to Las Vegas. Within days, he was back inside the museum, alone. Neighbors reported seeing lights moving through the building at all hours. Security footage, later leaked online, showed Zak pacing the halls, talking to himself, sometimes screaming at nothing. On one occasion, he was filmed carrying what appeared to be the Dybbuk box through the museum, placing it in different rooms as if searching for the right location. Friends who managed to reach him by phone described a man who sounded defeated but defiant. He insisted he was close to understanding something fundamental about the nature of consciousness and the afterlife. He claimed the entities he had encountered weren't demons or ghosts, but something far more complex, intelligences that existed outside human perception of time and space, and they had chosen him as a conduit. The encrypted video file surfaced exactly 1 week after Zak's 48th birthday. In it, he appears drastically different from the confident investigator millions of viewers knew. His face is gaunt. Dark circles under his eyes suggest weeks of sleepless nights. He speaks in measured, deliberate tones, as if carefully choosing every word. "I need to tell you something I should have admitted years ago," he begins. Ghost Adventures was never just entertainment. It was a ritual. Every investigation, every lockdown, every time we provoked entities in the dark, we were opening doors. And I was too arrogant, too obsessed with proof to understand what that meant. He describes a progression that started with simple curiosity and evolved into something he calls metaphysical addiction. The more he encountered, the more he needed to encounter. Each investigation had to be more extreme, more dangerous, more likely to produce evidence. He admits that he pushed his crew into situations he knew were unsafe, dismissed warnings from religious advisors, and ignored every sign that he was losing control. But the most chilling revelation comes when he discusses the Dybbuk box, perhaps the most famous cursed object in his collection. He confesses that he never fully sealed it after purchasing it in 2018. The ritual performed on camera was incomplete, deliberately so. He wanted to see what would happen if the entity inside had limited freedom. "I thought I could control it," he says, his voice breaking. "I thought I was the one asking questions, but it was studying me, learning, waiting." He claims that by 2022, he could no longer distinguish between his own thoughts and what he calls the influence. Decisions he made, objects he acquired, investigations he pursued, all of it felt guided by something outside his conscious will. He describes waking up in different rooms of the museum with no memory of how he got there, finding notes in his handwriting discussing rituals he never researched, hearing his own voice speaking when his mouth was closed. The video ends with a warning. "If you're watching this," Zak says, staring directly into the camera, "then I'm either dead or something worse has happened. The museum needs to be destroyed. Every object inside it needs to be properly sealed or destroyed by people who understand what they're dealing with. I built a monument to darkness, and now it's consuming me. Don't let it spread beyond these walls." The screen goes black. The file ends. Within hours of the video spreading through production circles, the paranormal community erupted. Demonologists, priests, and paranormal researchers who had warned about the dangers of Zak's methods for years felt validated. Others accused him of staging an elaborate hoax to revive interest in a franchise that had lost momentum. The Travel Channel released a terse statement. "We are aware of unauthorized material circulating online. We cannot verify its authenticity and have no comment at this time." Behind the scenes, sources say the network launched an internal investigation to determine how the footage leaked and whether Zak himself was responsible. Aaron Goodwin broke his silence in a now-deleted Instagram post. "I love Zak like a brother, but some bridges once crossed can't be uncrossed. I pray he finds peace." Billy Tolley and Jay Wasley remained silent, though both updated their social media bios to remove any mention of ghost adventures. But the most disturbing development came from the Las Vegas Police Department. In late December 2025, they were called to the haunted museum after neighbors reported screaming and what sounded like breaking glass. When officers arrived, they found the front door unlocked. Inside, furniture was overturned. Objects lay shattered on the floor, but Zak was nowhere to be found. His phone, wallet, and car keys were still inside. Security footage showed him entering the museum at 11:47 p.m. the previous night, but there was no footage of him leaving. Every exit was locked from the inside. There was no evidence of forced entry or exit. He simply vanished. Police classified it as a missing person case, but those familiar with Zak's work saw darker possibilities. Paranormal investigators pointed to historical cases of people who had become too entangled with malevolent forces simply ceasing to exist. Skeptics argued he staged his own disappearance, possibly fleeing to avoid legal or financial troubles. The museum remains closed, its future uncertain. Some call for it to be demolished. Others want it preserved as a cautionary tale. But everyone agrees on one thing. Whatever Zak Bagans unleashed during his 2 decades of paranormal investigation, it didn't end with his disappearance. It's still there, waiting in the dark halls of a Gothic mansion in Las Vegas, surrounded by objects that should never have been collected. 3 weeks after Zak vanished, a package arrived at the Travel Channel's headquarters in Los Angeles. No return address, no postage. Security footage showed no one delivering it. It simply appeared on the reception desk between camera sweeps. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The handwriting was identified as Zak's, but the message was disturbing in its clarity. "I was wrong about everything. They aren't ghosts. They aren't demons. There's something that's been waiting for us to build the technology to see them, and now that we have, they're coming through. The museum was just the beginning. Destroy this. Destroy everything, before it's too late." The USB drive reportedly contained hundreds of hours of footage, investigations that never aired, private recordings from inside the museum, and according to one person who saw them before the network confiscated the drive, videos of Zak speaking to the camera about entities that exist outside our dimension, waiting for humans to open enough doorways for them to cross over permanently. The truth, as he always said, finds its way through the dark.